Hello everyone, I'm Jax the Reviewer, you're the audience, and after this long wait, I'm finally getting to review Kong, Skull Island, and you better believe I saw this bad boy in IMAX. So before we review this film, let me give you a rundown on where this film stands in the Godzilla universe. It's been 3 years since Gareth Edwards' Godzilla, a film that established its own universe, entirely separate from any Toho film. Yes, even the one from 2016. And now it's time for Legendary Pictures to expand this universe that they've created. Legendary Pictures is planning to make this a cinematic universe, like DC or Marvel. So the idea here is release this King Kong movie, which is canon with Godzilla 2014, and then, in 2018, releasing another Godzilla film that's canon with these two films. After this will come the 2020 film, Godzilla vs Kong. Not to be confused with King Kong vs Godzilla. So basically they're doing what DC should have done, having two Godzilla films and a King Kong movie to establish the characters before they release a Brawl movie, where the two fight and then inevitably become friends by the end of the film. Okay, quick side note, as the film is just out, I won't be using as much footage of the film as I would in most reviews. And I'd like to warn you that this film will have spoilers in it. If you don't want spoilers, skip to the time on the screen, and you'll get a spoiler-free conclusion, so you'll still get my opinion, but there won't be any spoilers. Now, like any logical kaiju fan, I've been excited for this film since Godzilla 2014, so let's get straight into my review of Kong Skull Island. Now this film starts in an exciting way. We see Hank Marlowe, played by John C. Reilly, crash landing on a beach, and he jukes it out with the man who shot him down, Gunpei. Their fight is really tense, the use of classic guns followed by a small sword, I love it. It keeps the audience interested straight from the start of the film, and I love how Kong shows up midway through the fight. After he shows up and terrifies the both of them, we are to assume that Hank and Gunpei never fought again. I love it. It's an early demonstration of how Kong operates on this island. This incarnation of Kong is a guardian. He isn't a monster. He brings balance to the island, and that's what we see here, bringing peace between two rival soldiers. After this we're given some fancy credits. They are very reminiscent of the Godzilla 2014 ones, and I'm in love with the retro government style. After this we're introduced to Bill, played by John Goodman, and Houston, played by Corey Hawkins. Both working for Monarch, they are desperate to visit Skull Island, and they get this permission by playing on the Cold War angst at the time. They claim that the Russians will visit this island in just 4 days' time, and so the Americans are very eager to send them off as they want to claim this land before the Russians can. Next we're introduced to our other protagonists. These are an army squad just 1 day after the end of the Vietnam War. So they are all talking about how they miss their moms and daughters, but I find this cliche and I don't really like this. For example, we never see any of these family members, so we don't feel as much sympathy because we've never met any of these characters. It would be more sympathetic if we were showing them bonding with each other, and we are shown how each of them are friends, and we are shown how they care for each other. That way, when one of them dies, we see their reactions and we feel just as sad. But I'd be just as sympathetic, if not more, if all this time was spent showing how close these soldiers are. Rather than show how close they are to characters we'll never see, such as their family, show how close they are to each other. Just like how in Aliens, we are shown how each of the Marines are friends with each other and how they care for each other, or their dynamics. You never see characters like Hicks referring to their family back home. Instead, we are seeing how they care about people who are part of the Marines. This way there is even more weight when people die, as we have to see these soldiers deal with the loss of their best and closest friends. This would be a great way of fleshing out their characters even more, and it wouldn't even make the film any longer because you could cut out all the scenes spent on developing their family. Of course Sam Jackson is in this movie, playing Lieutenant Colonel Preston Packard, but let's face it, it's Sam Jackson being Sam Jackson. By the way, if you're looking for a good time, check out Sam Jackson's Facebook. He is going crazy for Kong Skull Island. He seems like a bigger fanboy than any of us. Anyway, his character has an interesting dichotomy. Whilst he wants his soldiers to be happy and cares for them, he can't bear the idea of ending this war. Whilst it's never fully explained, it can be assumed that it's because he's lost so many soldiers, and so he hates the idea that the war has ended, and for all intents and purposes, he's lost this war. This group of soldiers consists of, but is not limited to, Toby Kebbell as Jack Chapman, Shea Wiggum as Cole, Thomas Mann as Slivko, Jason Mitchell as Mills, and Eugene Cordero as Rellas. Now, as a lot of these characters don't get much development, they get by on their strong performances. They balance these very intense performances with great comedic timing. Of course, the casting choice that drew a lot of attention was Tom Hiddleston as Tracker, ex-SAS, and all-around badass James Conrad. I mean, this guy's introduction is badass alone. He wins a pool game and then goes MacGyver on their asses, using all the pool equipment to beat up some thugs who try and attack him. Now I know he's not the typical Hollywood badass, but he got ripped for this role, and honestly, I loved him in it. Hiddleston needs to be given the chance to explore other roles, or he'll forever be typecast as Loki. Though disclaimer, I liked Adrian Brody in Predators, and that's a very infamously similar casting choice. Along with him, we're introduced to Mason Weaver, played by Brie Larson. Now I do wonder why they hired an anti-war photographer on what is basically a nature expedition. But this was the Vietnam War era, so basically any photographer at this point was either anti-war or on LSD. The crew are sent to the island in a beautiful scene. The giant cloud that surrounds the island is a visual spectacle, and it's something we haven't really seen before. Now my favourite shot here is the shot of the Richard Nixon bobblehead. Rather than see everyone's reactions to the immense power of these giant stormy clouds, we're instead watching the shaking of a bobblehead. It's really a clever way, and it shows that the director has some vision to what he's doing. It's a little thing, but it shows that the director Jordan Vogt-Roberts, I can almost promise I pronounced that wrong, has a vision. I mean, his creativity is all over this movie, from the beautiful use of colour and the lush jungles to the awesome cinematography. Be that the bobblehead, the first person shot, or the badass look at this explosion reflected in my glasses shot. If I have one complaint, it's the repetition. Whenever a shot looks really good, he'll use it again and again. For example, when the bobblehead is used in the storm, it looks awesome. But then we see the same shot again as a helicopter crashes, and it loses some of the impact from the first time we see it. Another example of this is the sunglasses explosion shot. Whilst it looked amazing the first time, it's then used again when Samuel L. Jackson is trying to kill King Kong. But either way, I just love that we are getting these beautiful shots. It shows that Legendary is trying to use creative directors, not making generic monster movies that you see a lot of these days. Entering the island, the team quickly encounter Kong, and it's brilliant. He makes short work out of any of them. Now this is likely a reaction to the Peter Jackson movie, as a lot of people complain that King Kong didn't appear in that for a long period. But I think this works anyway. It serves the purpose of splitting up the group and then shortening the character roster. Kong here is amazing. I love that they went for something completely different here. Peter Jackson's Kong looked like a giant gorilla, and for this film, Kong looks like a giant man in a gorilla suit. It's just like the change from 1933's very gorilla design to Toho's more humanoid man in a suit. This is a very clever move. I mean, it ties back to the classic Toho Kong, and whilst this wasn't the original Kong, it was the Kong that fought Godzilla, so it's an awesome homage to this version. With the team split up because of the carnage, they all head off in different directions, as they all have different goals. Sam Jackson begins a hunt for Jack Chapman's group, as he believes them to have all the supplies of ammunition. This is a key point for Sam Jackson's character, as he's now discovered his solution to his post-war depression. He's found a new war to fight, and this is one he intends to win this time. However, Sam Jackson's expedition is quickly sidetracked by a giant spider. Now this is really exciting because my favourite aspect of the King Kong movies is all the creatures of Skull Island. It's not actually Kong himself. So seeing this giant spider was really interesting. I love all of these different creatures, such as the centipedes, the V-Rexes, the spiders. All of these creatures are so inventive and they never cease to impress me. The effects here are stellar, and I love the look of the spider. I mean, it's got such long legs, and I think that's the creepiest part of a spider. If I have one issue with this spider, it's that it's called the Mother Longlegs and not Kamunga. You know, the classic giant spider from the Toho movies? Nah, of course I'm kidding, but it would have been a nice reference if they had thrown that in. Meanwhile, Conrad, Weaver, Brooks, Slivko, Sanlin, who I didn't mention before because she is literally expendable, and Victor Neves, a Lando Calrissian lookalike, encountered the natives, and along with them, Marlowe, who is looking a little worse for wear.
I call them skull crawlers. Why? Never said that name out loud before. It sounds stupid now that I say. Just, you call them whatever you want.
Marlowe spills the exposition, explaining that Kong is their guardian. He protects them from creatures such as the skull crawlers, who, incidentally, were responsible for killing off Gunpei. Off screen, of course. Now, the exact situation is left kind of vague as to how the rest of the King Kong tribe died, but we're to assume that the Skullcrawlers killed off King Kong's parents. Now, that doesn't make much sense to me. I mean, how is it that King Kong, the child of these apes, manages to survive, whereas these great adult gorillas were the ones that were killed? I feel like that could have done some explaining, and maybe they'll explain it later down the line. After spending some time with the tribe, this group start to head down the river in a boat that was made out of the plane of Marlowe's. Marlowe joins the group and they all hope to find refuge and slowly get off of this island. In quite a terrifying scene, Neves is carried away by these attacking birds. It's quite interesting actually, because this is very similar to Jurassic World, where these horrifying birds drag away an innocent victim, drown them in the water before ripping them apart. I mean, it's interesting, but in that macabre kind of way. Elsewhere, Chapman tries to get some water from a lake, only to see Kong attack a giant octopus. Now, if you haven't seen my review of King Kong vs Godzilla, definitely check it out, because I'm pretty sure this is a reference to Ogatu, the giant octopus, who appeared in King Kong vs Godzilla. Chapman then runs into a giant stick insect. It's an awesome design, and it's something completely new to the King Kong franchise. And then Chapman dies. Yep, Skullcrawler just eats him out of the blue. We spent so long developing this character, learning how sympathetic we should be since he has a daughter, and then they just kill him straight out. This is a terribly handled death. I mean, I don't feel anything because he dies so quick, and there's given no musical cues, nothing is spent to try and make you feel sympathy for him. What a waste of a death of a character that was spent so long in becoming sympathetic. Mason and Conrad find King Kong and reach out to him, feeling his face, and it's really a nicely done scene. The CGI is impeccable. You really feel like that is a real creature, and seeing her reach out for him is symbolic that she's becoming sympathetic towards King Kong. Of course, this scene is very reminiscent of the Jurassic Park scene, where Lex reaches out to the brachiosaur and becomes more sympathetic towards the dinosaurs. It's almost directly an influence of this film. Unlike Peter Jackson's King Kong film, in this film I actually feel sympathetic towards King Kong. He seems much nicer. Maybe it's because we don't see those aggressive scenes where he's just pushing Anne over and over again, but something about it makes me feel like I like Kong more in this movie. That's important, because if King Kong is going to die in a film, you need to feel sympathy for him, and that was something that really lacked in Peter Jackson's King Kong. Both teams eventually run into each other, but this causes tension in the group. Samuel L. Jackson wants to hunt for Chapman and get the ammunition, whereas Marlowe is more in favour of leaving the island while they still can. Eventually Samuel L. Jackson wins over Marlowe through his aggression, forcing Marlowe to take them to the Forbidden Zone. The Forbidden Zone being the gravesite of King Kong's parents, and the home of the Skullcrawlers. Whilst the crew explore the ruins of the Forbidden Zone, a Skullcrawler shows up, causing everyone to hide behind some rocks. This Skullcrawler has obviously never eaten Soylent Green before, as it throws up the remains of its last victim, and in a huge coincidence, it's the same one that ate Chapman earlier. The crew find Chapman's dog tag, and this leads them to realise that their search was in vain, and they've in fact found themselves in the belly of the beast. Strapping a turret to the skull of a Triceratops, they're prepared to fight against the Skullcrawlers. This attack is completely in vain, as the Skullcrawler pulls apart this team, destroying the turret and killing tons of men. It's a brilliant fight sequence and very tense. My highlight of this scene is when Bill realises that his camera is broken and the flash keeps going off. It's really tense as he realises the flash is going to alert the Skullcrawlers and he's almost certainly dead. He pretty much accepts his death as the Skullcrawler rips him apart and then goes for the rest of the crew. This is brilliant as the flash keeps going off in the Skullcrawler's chest. It means the audience can keep seeing where he is, but only for a split second. It's really tense and really exciting. It's clear that this is more of a vision from the director, rather than the generic kind of attack that you'd see in maybe a Michael Bay movie. The scene becomes beautiful when poison gas is dropped in the area and the crew are attacked by tiny birds. It's left to Conrad to cut apart these birds with his amazing tiny sword. This scene is brilliant and it creates a very visual experience. The crew get lucky as Mason kills the Skullcrawler, even though she's the only non-military trained person there. Of course, Samuel L. Jackson blames it all on King Kong, because King Kong was the one who took away all their equipment and killed so many of his men. Because of that, Conrad takes away all the non-military people and takes the pacifist route, trying to get off the island. Whilst this is happening, Sam Jackson plans his assault on King Kong. He lights the water with napalm, he gets flamethrowers, he plans people to put turrets down. It's really tense as he gets ready to take on this big battle, and it's quite a stellar performance. Samuel L. Jackson, even though he just stands there, he looks so intimidating in the way he stares down Kong. Eventually beating King Kong, Jackson places down a bunch of charges around King Kong, planning to blow him up. However, I'm curious if this would actually work, as in King Kong vs Godzilla, they tried a very similar technique and it did not work. Conrad and Weaver quickly return and they try to convince the crew not to kill King Kong. They manage to do this and none of the soldiers do want to kill King Kong in the end. However, Sam Jackson is still resilient to this. But in no time, they are attacked by the Alpha Skullcrawler, named Ramarak. This is important because it symbolises how, without King Kong, this island goes into chaos. The group flee, but Samuel L. Jackson stays to try and kill King Kong. And of course, Kong just slams his fist down on Samuel L. Jackson in what is actually a satisfying death, if only a comedic one. Ramarak chases the survivors, and Cole decides it's time to end his life in a worthy sacrifice. Now, this is one of the few characters that I actually cared about. I don't know if it's because I love Shea Wiggum in other things, or because this character got the most laughs out of me, or that he represented a true case of character development. Going from a self-obsessed and cynical man to a person who would give his life to save everyone else. But either way, I got kinda sad at his death, and so it really sucked when he tried to kill himself and he was just thrown into a mountain and it was played off for laughs. I'll admit I laughed quite a lot at this death scene, but it represents something much worse in this film. When Chapman died, it was too fast to care. When Neves died, it was just used for shock. Even when John Goodman died, it wasn't even treated with any mourning, it was just an instigator for another action scene. I mean, come on guys, you earned at least a couple sad death scenes, make use of them. Luckily, Kong returns and he does so to protect the rest of the group, and this begins the best fight sequence in this film. The best part of this fight sequence is when Kong is held down by chains as he's in the wreckage of some ships. When Kong looks over and sees these fans attached to the chains, the audience start to feel like, is he gonna do this? Is this actually gonna happen? And then, when King Kong gets out those fans, the audience are cheering. It's an awesome fight sequence, and seeing him bring out these fans, cutting apart Ramarak, it really gets the audience pumping. In the same way that Godzilla using his fire breath got the rest of the audience pumped in Godzilla 2014, and it highlights the most important thing about King Kong in fighting. Whilst Godzilla is a tough brute, he hasn't got the brains or the stamina of King Kong. King Kong is very agile, able to jump from trees to trees like an ape, and he uses the stamina to use weapons. It's a great addition to him, and it shows how this fight is going to be so balanced in Godzilla vs Kong. With Ramarak dead, the rest of the team escape the island, and we get one last scream from King Kong before credits. Sometime later, Marlowe returns home and reunites with his wife, finally meeting with his grown son. An interesting fact about this is his son is played by the same actor who played the younger version of him at the very start of the film. As the credits roll, the audience are left with two questions in their head. Number one, where are the Russians? I mean, at the very start, John Goodman was talking about how the Russian satellite is going to find this island. Maybe he was just making that up, but you'd think that eventually someone would find this island. Monarch could try and keep this a secret, but surely they have no jurisdiction in Russia. Maybe I'm looking too far into this, and maybe that's unfair of me, but I do think that's kind of a plot hole. But maybe they'll explain it in one of the future films. I definitely want a Kong Skull Island 2. Number 2. Will there be an after credit sequence? Hell yeah there is. This is now a Marvel Cinematic Universe type franchise, so we can expect some after credit sequences that really reward the big fans of these kaiju genres. However, what does happen in the after credit sequence? Well, let's discuss. First, it is revealed that Conrad and Mason are joining Monarch, but the real cream of this after credit sequence is the footage of the cave paintings. There's Rodan, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, or Ghidra, whichever you prefer, setting them up to appear in 2018's Godzilla King of the Monsters. And as the screen fades to black, we hear Godzilla's roar. And goddamn do I love that legendary 2014 Godzilla roar. Okay, that's the plot done. Now let me tell you what I think about this film. I love it. This has almost everything I needed this film to have. It links the shared cinematic universe, but does so in a subtle and fun way that only fans of the franchise will get. As well as this, it holds up perfectly on its own, just like any good shared universe film should. Personally, I love Peter Jackson's King Kong, and I feel it was the best rendition of that story we could have had. So it was a brilliant decision to change the plot of Kong entirely, making this a retro Vietnam War film and a beautiful looking one that carries the director's stunning vision. I mean, they changed everything, even making Kong look less like an ape and more like a person in an ape costume. The acting in this film is superb. No one's winning any Oscars, but they fit their roles to a T. As well as this, the soundtrack is a brilliant one. It's not groundbreaking like Guardians of the Galaxy, but it's better than Suicide Squad, with every song fitting the scene perfectly. And who doesn't love Ziggy Stardust? One of my few issues with this film was the poorly handled death scenes, but I can look past that as it is a learning curve. Overall, this film kept me so interested in all the characters and reassured me that this universe is a strong one. I've not been a big King Kong person. In fact, I usually watch these films for the Skull Island stuff, but in the hype for this film, I've watched so many King Kong films and I've become a big fan of this character, and this definitely does him justice. And because of this really resounding review, I'm going to give him 8 Samuel L. Jacksons out of 10.
Hold on to your butt.
Thank you all for watching my review, and if you enjoyed it, remember to subscribe, comment and anything else. I'm currently holding a Godzilla retrospective and a King Kong retrospective, so if any of that attracts you, definitely stay tuned in my channel. Thank you all for watching my review, and I'll see you on my next one.